Hello world, this is Kelly reporting to you about the menacing realm of social media.
Hello, my name is Erica and I have a question for you. Have you ever opened your eyes to the negative impact that social media has on society, especially teens today?
Did you know that 16% of the world is made up by teenagers?
And 90% of those teenagers are involved in social media in some way.
Let that sink in.
Studies have shown that young adults and teenagers that use social media frequently have reported experiencing up to 66% higher rates of depression than those who do not.
In this video, we will be addressing the differing effects of social media on various generations through a series of interviews composed of raw emotions and opinions.
We will also be discussing the statistics of how social media leads to both physical and mental strain.
How old are you?
12.
I'm 15.
I'm 16.
16.
18.
18.
20.
So I'm 24.
I'm 52 years old.
53.
79.
My age is 81 years.
Do you have a smartphone?
Yes.
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 Yes, I do.
I do, yeah.
Yes, I do.
Yes.
No.
Yes, I do.
Do you participate in social media?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. I did, yeah. Still do. Not as much, but yeah, I do.
Yes, I do.
Do you participate in social media?
Yes, with my husband and Jazzercise, my daughter's classes.
A little bit.
What is your average screen time?
6 hours.
My average screen time is 8 hours.
7.5 hours.
Around 6 hours.
About 6 to 8 hours.
2.5 hours.
Average now is 5 hours.
About 5 hours.
About 2.5 hours a day.
Average screen time is 2 hours a day.
How much of your screen time is taken up by social media?
An hour and 30 minutes.
About 4 hours.
4 hours.
4 hours.
About half of it.
About 25%.
This week, it was like 2 hours of that was.
About 40 to 50 minutes.
45 minutes to an hour.
Between 5 and 10 minutes.
Very young children are now being introduced to technology, some in order to distract themselves while parents have some time to themselves. This results in kids ages 8 to 12 spending on average 4 to 6 hours each day on technology. This will only increase more and more as this generation grows up. Teenagers, however, who did not grow up with nearly as much technology, average 9 hours each day.
On average, an adult spends around 3 to 4 hours on their phone each day. In the interview, we found that adult screen times are lower than the typical teens and adolescent screen times. This reveals that teens are more likely to become addicted to their phones than adults.
A big factor in teenagers becoming more addicted to social media is what is known as FOMO, or the fear of missing out. When someone's phone buzzes, they tend to reach for it right away, eager to check the notification. However, if it is not what they want to see, it will only decrease their mood and make them feel lonely. This contributes to higher levels of anxiety and low self-esteem.
Do you find yourself tempted to pick up your phone while driving?
Yes.
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 Yeah.
Yeah, but it's usually to change music or look up a song.
Absolutely, without a doubt, yeah. Oh my God, especially when it rings. There's a lot of times where like you hear that notification, you're like, oh, I wonder what that is. Like out of all the things that it could be, so you could go and I guess put different notification tones. Obviously, like Snapchat has its own notification tone, Instagram has its own notification tone compared to like the Nest at my home when I know someone's at my front door that has its own notification tone. It's like, I know what it is. There are some things that I won't pick up and there's some things that I do now.
Yes, I do.
Tempted, yes.
Yes, but I try not to. Yeah.
Only for a phone call.
Do you find yourself tempted to pick up your phone in class?
No, but if my teachers did allow it, then I'd be tempted to.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not at work, but in class.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be lying if I said no. I mean, it's almost kind of like going to church and you feel your phone buzz. You're like, do I pick it up or do I not? Nowadays, I feel like most people would pick up their phone, you know? So, yeah, no, absolutely. For a simple answer, yeah.
Do you find yourself tempted to pick up your phone during work or inappropriate settings?
From time to time, yes.
Yeah, sometimes there's that thing you want to check for an email or check if there's an update on something.
Yes, I have.
No.
Over 90% of drivers admit they pick up their phone while driving. This number is extremely unsettling, and the reason why 14% of all fatal car accidents have to do with phones. In all, in 2020, 1.6 million accidents were reported that had to do with cell phones. Picking up your phone in inappropriate places such as the car can lead to a lot of dangerous situations.
Two other major effects due to distractions from phones is loss of sleep and decrease in grades. A research center survey of about 750 13 to 17-year-olds found that about 50% are online constantly, and 90 to 100% are involved in social media platforms such as YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, or Snapchat. With Americans checking their phone on average 80 times a day, students are becoming extremely distracted and are unable to pay attention in class. Additionally, phones and screen time are adding a huge effect to sleep due to the blue light emitted.
Due to excessive phone and social media use, 2 out of every 3 Americans will experience eye strain. This is extremely harmful, especially since young adolescents and teenagers may spend up to 9 hours or more each day staring at a screen. The light emitted from our phones may potentially lead to what is called macular degeneration, which is where people develop blurry vision over time. This proves that social media takes a toll on not just mental health, but physical health as well.
Have you ever experienced online threats or harassment?
Personally, on my phone, no, I haven't, but in a group setting, I have.
No.
Yeah, I have a couple times. Yes, twice.
Yes.
Harassment. Yeah.
Me personally, no. But I know it's obviously a huge thing, but me personally, no.
In social media realm, not really. But as far as online threats like viruses and robocallers and that dangerous stuff, yeah.
Technology acts as an easy way for children in America to be bullied. Females are far more likely to be cyberbullied, which may be a possible explanation to why females are so much more insecure. 32% of American teens say they have had a false rumor spread about them online. Bullies use technology as a way to hide.
How do you think society would be different if phones and social media didn't exist?
I think it'd be very different because I feel like then we'd be outside a lot more, rain or shine, and we would have less mental health problems.
I think mental health and car accident rates would go down a lot.
I think that there would be a lot less mental health problems with the world.
I think everyone would be more social and there would be less mental health issues.
Boring. I think communication would be harder, but at the same time, people would be more connected and learn to live in the moment more.
I think a major thing would be that people would appreciate the relationships they have with people way more and get a lot more out of it, because having such a connection, you value each connection that you have with everybody a little less, and that brings in a lot of loneliness. And there's staggering evidence to show that people have a lot less closer individuals in their life now than they did 4 years ago.
I think we'd all be a lot nicer. I think we'd be a lot nicer. One thing about, and I guess talking about today that I kind of thought about is with the ability to get the media on the phone, people are so easily influenced, and so then it creates like a whole sort of like ideas, and with everyone being, you know, their own person, they can pull from those ideas and think what they want, and they kind of create general schemas of the world around them. So I feel like if you took away the phone, they would have nothing but only the interaction of the actual world around them to make those schemes. So you don't, they can then use that, like what's actually going on, rather than just reading the story right there. Obviously we have the newspaper and things, but I feel like with it being so much more accessible, it's a lot easier to get into the hands of the people that are much more, what's the word I'm looking for? Influence, that's it. Yeah, thank you.
Well, if phones and social media did not exist, there would be an initial shock to the system. There's no question about that, because the modern day generation, even my generation, we've come to depend on it for finding out what's going on, for getting information. However, I feel very confident that once this initial shock wore off, and I really don't think it would be a long time, you would begin to see people revert back to systems that were in place that worked just fine in the past. And they would begin to adjust and go back to, and they wouldn't be so dependent on things like instant gratification. They would begin to say, okay, they would accept it. There'd be an initial shock, then there'd be probably some anger. But then once the acceptance started to kick in, we would probably revert back to what we did before we had phones. We would begin making phone calls, calling people, leaving messages, and not be so expectant of that instant gratification.
Well, there would be a lot less people distracted while driving. I think that's, the first thing you see when you don't see skid marks and there's an accident, a lot of people say, oh, they were probably texting and driving, because there's not even any skid marks. So they didn't know, they were veering off the road. I think, especially for the younger generation, there's a lot of cyberbullying, and I think it causes a lot of anxiety and depression in younger people. And they're not always mature enough to filter out the bad and negative information that's out there. I also think it can lead to like hyperactivity if people are playing games or on social media all the time. There's like immediate gratification with that, and it can lead to impatience.
Well, I think that there would be more interaction among people. When you look back on history, people communicated in all different ways. But I mean, it's here to stay. There's no doubt about that.
If they didn't exist, that means the only way you're going to be able to communicate with someone is eye to eye. And social media, you've lost a lot of that. And even to the point that people will put things on social media. And my feeling is that they say things that are not nice. And the reason they say it is because they can hide behind their phone. They're not talking to the person directly.
From the various opinions, most people feel as if social media has more of a negative impact on the world. Many feel as if without social media, there would be more in-person social interaction.
How do you think social media has affected different generations?
I think it's made younger generations have more mental health problems.
I think it's affected our generation the most, and it's caused a lot of mental health problems.
I think it's heavily affected Gen Z and the younger generations because they grew up with it and they base their lives around it, and the older generations aren't really affected anymore.
I think it has affected the younger generations more because they grew up with it. I think a lot more people in younger generations are more affected by social media, and a lot more mental illnesses are more common now because people will be comparing themselves to other people they see on social media.
It's definitely had more of a mental effect on younger generations, because the younger you are at this point, the more social media has been around and been a part of everyday life, and I feel like that shapes people's personalities a little bit more because you almost feel a sense of, oh, this is something you need to do to put your life out there, and it's a way of staying connected with your friends. For older generations, it's not something that they've had for a while, so it's more of a new novel thing and a tool to use in addition to the kind of relationships you have with people. I feel like for younger generations, they get confused with making relationships with people and tying that into using social media.
So for the newer generations, I feel like there's a little bit of social disconnect there, maybe when it comes to interpersonal relationships or interpersonal interaction, you know, so small talk may not even be a thing. Everyone's just on their phone. My little brother, for example, he's at the dinner table, he's on his phone. It's hard to have a conversation with my little brother, so it's like, I feel like for me, now that I'm getting out of that, that's the separation between the individuals that didn't grow up with the smartphones and the individuals that did. So
yeah. The generation that I grew up in, we grew up without the internet, and we were a crossover generation where we saw the internet come into being, and then of course the onset of social media. And my generation remembers what it's like before there was cell phones and social media, and we're always looking and saying there's a certain skill set that the current generation does not have because they depend on their phone. Now let's jump ahead to the generation that doesn't know life without social media. I feel the effect on them is that they've lost interpersonal communication skills, in that if I sat down with, you know, say half a dozen teenagers and took all their phones away and left them in a room, I think they would have a little bit of awkwardness figuring out how to interact. And that's the kind of personal skills that my generation grew up with that was inherently learned. We didn't even have to think about it. And I think that the generation now that has grown up with social media are lacking some of those skills, and they'll have to pick them up in different ways down the road.
It affects people like senior citizens in that it gives them something to do. A lot of them are at home alone, and it allows them to connect with other people. So that's a positive thing, keeps them from being lonely. I think people in the middle generations it's affected differently. I think some people, like my generation, are kind of addicted to like social media, and they spend a lot of time. Some other people, like myself, just look at it quickly to see if there's any messages from friends or any new updates, photos, accomplishments, things like that. The younger generation, I think, you know, since they've grew up with social media, it's something that they use a lot, frequently, that they spend a lot of time, and it's just part of what they do on a daily basis.
Tremendously. My husband's niece committed suicide. She was very active on social media. She suffered from depression, and whether she was using that social media instead of getting more help, I think that's where the drawback is. You know, people, and also it affects a lot of people. Take what people say on social media to heart, and they judge themselves by somebody else they may not even know.
In my day, there was a lot of talk back and forth between two people. Where today, there seems to be less talking between two people. Everybody wants to send messages, text messages, or talk on the phone. That's probably the biggest difference.
How do you think phones have affected different generations?
I think it's affected them very differently, because I've seen that phones have been given out to the younger generations, like kindergartners, and I think it's really not good because they might misuse it. And then I think it's good though, because for the older people, they can get in touch with their families easier and quicker.
I think it distracts people from everyday things that go on in their lives, and it causes more problems.
I think it's caused all generations to lose some of their social skills.
I think phones have affected the older generations more than social media because it's a lot easier for them, but it's also the same with the younger generations because they can't get off of them.
I think it makes people more lazy and people get more distracted.
I think more and more people from younger generations are being introduced to them at an earlier age and becoming more dependable on them.
In the same way that social media has affected younger generations more, phones have the same aspect. Again, because, when older generations, when they were growing up, the older you are at this point, there wasn't such thing as having a phone. It's not something you own until later in life. And you got your entertainment by hanging out with friends more in person and doing other things and just kind of being naturally curious with, not being inside. For younger generations, it's a big source of, entertainment and what you get a lot of your, kick out of. Like, you spend a lot more free time on it. So your life is tied more to the device specifically, and getting away from it, if you use it too much, can feel unnatural when it's more natural to be off your phone.
Again, with the social aspect, there's that. Overall, we live in such an on-demand economy now that I think there's obviously there are pros and cons. The smartphone has a huge pro when it comes to, being able to have Zoom calls on the road if you're not sitting around. Like, that's a huge thing. Like, you can have your business meetings, you can go on about your life and still have some productivity to it. So minus, I think, the social aspect, and then probably the health aspect too. Blue light's really bad for your eyes. Now we have blue light glasses. So taking that into account, if you have that screen time that's up there, like I did at some point where like Instagram was at like a 7-hour day, like that's probably not good for my eyes at all. So, but with that being, I actually set timers on it to be like 5 minutes a day. You can probably improve your health a little bit. So overall, it's kind of like, it really just depends on, I feel like, who you ask and, what their usage for the phone is. If you ask a kid that's in high school and he's on his phone for social media always, that's probably not good. I don't think that's good at all. But if you ask someone like your dad, who's big into the union here and all that, he needs his phone. He really does. It's kind of a necessity. I can't imagine him carrying some like CB radio around and like, it's like, okay, hey, breaker 1-9, I'll be there at 5 o'clock for the meeting. Like, no, we're having a Zoom meeting today. So I think they are a definite positive, but I think it has limits.
The phone is not new, but the mobile phone, in that everybody has a phone on their hip at all times. And when the mobile phone first came out, it was like a special thing to get someone's cell phone number. And people kind of kept them secret as they still depended on the landline. That has all gone away. And now we've entered a time where people are more used to instant gratification, where if they pick up their phone off their hip and make a phone call, they expect that person to answer. And if they don't answer, they expect them to text. They expect to be able to connect with that person instantaneously, where prior to the internet and the whole mobile phone generation, which of course they became married very quickly, I would pick up the phone and call somebody, and even the days before answering machines were popular, you would leave a message with either someone who picked up, or you just accepted that they weren't home and you moved on. And we didn't expect instant gratification, where now the modern generation expects, if they pick up the phone and they text somebody or call somebody, they expect them to pick up the phone. They expect a line of communication. That has become an expectation that's embedded in today's society and today's generation.
I think for my generation, it's definitely a convenience. Being able to call people, you're at the store, can you check, if we need this, or being able to connect with my children, being able to connect with my husband who travels a lot. Also being able to connect with my friends if, we have several different group chats. If somebody needs to borrow something, or if somebody is trying to get rid of something and wants to see if anybody would like it. Younger generation, once again, it's just like most of the younger generation have had cell phones from maybe 4th, 5th, 6th grade. I think at least by high school, most students do have a smartphone. So it's something they come to rely on, and probably can't imagine life without it.
Oh, it's affected all of us tremendously. I mean, even you see a little kid with a phone, you know, you're like, oh my gosh. But yeah, there are advantages and disadvantages, you know.
It's probably, again, when I was growing up, there was one phone in the house, and that was hardwired to Ma Bell. So you had to be home. If you weren't home, you weren't able to catch the phone when it rang or anything along that line. With cell phones, you can now be in touch with just about anybody, any place, at any time. So people are spending more time on the phone than what we did when I was a kid.
From our interviews, we have concluded that more people feel as if the younger generation is more affected by social media than older generations. This is because the younger generation is more likely to compare themselves to others. This can lead to body dysmorphia and low self-esteem. These factors can also lead to deeper mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, and eating disorders.
How long do you think you could last without your phone?
I think a while, because I just got my phone a couple of days ago and I'm not really used to it.
About a month.
I could probably last a couple months without my phone.
Maybe like 2 days or something.
Probably like 2 days.
Probably a couple days.
The rest of my life.
That's a tough question for me because I'm required to have my phone for what my job requires me to have a phone. But let's take that factor out of it. I think I could do pretty well.
I'm trying to go zero social media if that's where we're going to gear towards this question. But again, for my life and like productivity wise and stuff like that, I probably couldn't do it. Oh, hang on. I got a phone call. There we go. I probably can go a day without it. Absolutely. I mean, I have a 3-year-old daughter myself, and her mother and I are separated. So it's like if anything happens to her, I have to have my phone on me. You know, daddy duties kick into play as well. So, I mean, if anything happens to your kid, you need to be right there and ready to answer the phone. So,
do I think it would be an adjustment? Yes, but I think could I get through a day without my phone? Yes, I think that would be the point at which if I got through 24 hours, I could probably look to the next day. And then the next day, I probably could go a couple of days and not have to have my phone.
I probably could go longer than the typical person. I mean, my biggest thing is I would feel disconnected from my family, my parents, if they need me. So that's my, like, if I forget my phone, that's my first thought. Oh my gosh, what if somebody needs to reach me, you know, and they can't, if there's an emergency or if somebody needs my help. Aside from that, I could probably go longer. I mean, I do like to look things up frequently, like, oh, I wonder how that works, or I wonder, you know, so like I'm more addicted to looking things up online, but I can use my computer to do that. So I wouldn't have the convenience of having my phone right there to do those kinds of things.
No, not long. We definitely need phones.
Nowadays, because people have gotten to use the cell phone so much, I could last a while, no problem. But I have to admit that when I leave the house, I find that I make sure I have the cell phone on my belt.
How has social media and phones affected your life?
It has affected me in a negative way because it makes me less productive, but it also has affected me in a positive way because it connects me with my friends.
It's easier to make friends and communicate with people.
It's affected my sleep schedule and my mental health.
It's made it a lot harder to socialize with people because people don't know how to interact anymore.
Makes communication easier, but it distracts people from their real life.
Like when my friends and I hang out, we always think about posting pictures and videos to social media rather than just like enjoying our time together.
It definitely created a sense of connection to the internet all the time and almost a necessity for that sense of connection. I feel like if I go anywhere without my phone, that's an irresponsible thing to do. But it's made everything feel a lot more connected and almost, you know, like you have to advertise your life a little bit more on the internet, and that's something I personally don't like to do, and I literally have to try and like put effort into that a lot of the time.
All right, so affected my life personally. I kind of grew up. I was born in '96, so they were cell phones were not new, but they were pretty new. I had my first cell phone probably in 6th or 7th grade, but it wasn't a smartphone. So it was really good for connectivity wise, you know, making sure that I was always in contact with mom and dad. Essentially, you know, just I guess for that peace of mind. But obviously as they grew and, you know, we had the smartphones that came out, a lot of that is productivity when it comes to, like I said, again, you know, work. I use it a lot for work. I got a bunch of aviation apps that I use. You're checking your bank statements, you know, making sure that the bills are paid on time. You can do all that through your phone. The emails, staying in touch when it comes to, you know, financial aid for FAFSA or Sallie Mae or something like that. All of that comes to your emails. And then, you know, so I guess how it's affected it, it's made it so much more easy. You know, life is a lot easier than I can imagine what it was without the cell phone, having all the paper around. It's probably maybe a little bit better for the environment, who knows? I mean, affected my life, I grew up with it. So, I mean, it's kind of second nature to me. Like, I always have my phone on me. I never don't.
First off, the phone has affected my life because I use it for my job, which has improved that. However, social media, I've seen an effect of social media destroy friendships between people that have opposing viewpoints in a various array of subjects. But definitely some good, some bad. But that's probably one of the downsides to social media, where I've seen people that were at one time friends are no longer friends.
It allows me to connect with people, friends, either friends that I see on a regular basis, or old friends from my childhood, from my high school that I would never have had opportunity to connect with without Facebook. I generally look for like the photos of their family, their friends, their children, you know, different events. I like looking at like the happy things, like the animal videos and photos and things like that, flowers. And my phone has allowed me to check my email on a regular basis. I don't check it through my work computer. It also allows me to stay connected with my children when I'm at work or when they're not home.
Very much so, tremendously. It takes up a lot of time.
Do you think it does more harm than good?
I'm drawn in between because I feel like it depends on the way the person's using it. Say they might misuse it by like doing online threats or bullying or posting things to scare people. But then I feel like it can do good because then you can get in touch with your friends, say, from long distance.
I think it does more harm than good because of the negative effects on mental and physical health issues.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
I think it's neutral because there's pros and cons to everything. I think it does about the same good as it does harm.
I think currently the way we're using technology and smartphones and social media, it's doing more harm because we don't understand how to use it properly. We don't exercise hygiene per se with it. We kind of use it inexperienced, and it can dig into a lot of other aspects of our lives that would normally be affected without it, and it can do a lot of damage on people, especially socially. So I think currently, until we learn how to use it better as a society, it does more harm.
I think nowadays, yeah, I think it started off pretty peaceful, but there's so much more within it now than the original softwares or the original websites came out to be. So yeah, I think personally, I think everyone would have a much better life if we didn't have that social media and you know, again, I'm trying to take my break from it and eventually try and go social media zero.
That's a tough question. And the reason it's a tough question is because there are so many aspects to what you can get by having that phone. When it comes to, if you're asking me specifically about social media, I personally think social media does more harm than good. And the reason is because we've lost those interpersonal skills. You can't hear voice inflection. I could say 3 words, the exact same 3 words, inflected 8 different ways that have 8 different meanings. You can't get that on social media. And I think the biggest problem with social media, and it's one of my favorite all-time posts that I ever saw on Facebook, and that was, my hope for you is that your life looks as good as it does posted on social media or Facebook. So I think it does more harm than good because we've lost the ability to connect with it. Social media takes away the ability to connect with someone on an interpersonal level.
I think individually that's, you know, you'd have to look at that on a case-by-case basis. Overall, I guess I'm biased because I know what the world was like before phones. And we tend to look at the negative things more so. So, you know, it's human nature, I think, to look at the challenges and the problems that phones have caused, like distractions during driving, people being addicted to social media, the depression that it can cause, the anxiety. So we kind of have to try to find a balance where we can use our phones for the good that they offer and limit the use of, limit the use so that it's not causing harm.
I don't think you can say it totally does. There is some harm, that occurs. But on the other hand, when you think about communication, it is vitally important. So that's the good that it does. So I think it's like 50-50.
In one respect, yes, because as I said in the previous answer, there's a lot of people who will put things on social media because they can hide behind them and they're not looking at the person face to face. They probably, if they were looking at someone, if they were upset with somebody and they were looking at them face to face, they might say, well, gee, I'm sorry I did that or whatever. But they wouldn't, social media gives them an out to do it without having anybody talking back to them.
So what can we do moving forward? The truth is that social media and smartphones are here to stay. And although there's no worldwide solution to completely wipe them out, there's a lot that you as an individual can do to protect yourself from the harms and dangers that they pose. Possible solutions include the following.
Form a set schedule for when you will get off your phone